Oh,
Test 1, 2. There we go.
hello? Okay.
There we go.
Well, we're going to wait a minute for Sheila to come back because our voting has not come up on the screen. So we want her to record our 5-0 vote on approving our agenda. And just so you know, we all approved our agenda, Sheila. Okay. So, governing board reports. We'll start with Miss Tweedy, please.
No report.
Mrs. Reed.
I'm going to go very quick. I had the opportunity to attend Coffee with a Cop with Cactus Park Precinct. That was a lot of fun, just getting to know the community action officers that service the southern part of our district. I also attended conversations with Kurt, and he had a very fun and interesting conversation.
Okay.
We shall say. Thank you again to the parents and staff members and executive cabinet members who were there for our study session on open enrollment and student behavior. I appreciate all of the time and attention that you took. Thank you to all of our staff members and parents that attended parent-teacher conferences last week and played an active role in your students' academic success. I also attended Ryan's Race on Saturday, which was hosted at Sandra Day O'Connor High School. And that was an amazing turnout from our community in the rain. There were still hundreds of people that came to support Ryan's memory and just work to have more of a holistic approach to mental health and wellness. And then Friday night, I had an opportunity to attend a live burn at the Glendale Regional Public Safety Training Center. They call it Gripstick. And that was really neat to be able to watch a live burn. And Senator Heather Carter was there. So that was neat to be able to accompany her there with that. So with that, I'm done. Next.
That was awesome, Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. I would also like to give a big shout out and thank you to Cabinet and the staff and parents who participated in the study session. It was very informative and just thought-provoking, and I appreciate all the hard work that went into that evening. I was able to attend ASBA's Rural Lobby Day. So their advocacy day had a little bit of a focus on our rural districts and some of their unique problems being out in the middle of nowhere. And so we feel a little bit like them, lack of internet tonight. It's one of their big issues. So it was a good day. We got to spend some time with the Senate President, Karen Fan from Legislative District 1, and listen to her talk about some of the bills that are moving their way through the legislature, and hear about getting some gifted funding and some additional funds for special education. So those were a couple of the highlights. I attended a class, certificate in education, through Edunomics through Georgetown University. There are still 6 more additional sessions, but lots of great information in there, and I look forward to sharing that with my fellow board members too, as I go through more of the sessions and can put together additional information. And finally, worked with Mrs. Ordway on a new board member orientation, with this being an election year, depending on who runs or however that works. We have 3 board seats up, so we hope to have a more comprehensive orientation set for them. And with that, I am also done.
That was awesome. Miss Frank.
Well, I'd like to start off giving a shout out to West Wing's community ed program, their after school program, for the awesome, amazing Be Air Aware poster I was presented with tonight. And I'm really looking forward to showing that off at the air quality department tomorrow. So I can't wait to get to work tomorrow morning.
Ooh, said no one ever. I'm sorry, but when you love your job, you say it every day.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry I was unable to attend the study session last week. I was not feeling well. I did watch it, the live stream online, and I would like to also express my support for the comments Mrs. Reed and Ms. Tweedy and Mrs. Ordway made concerning behavior supports for Gen Ed students at each campus. I would very much be in favor of that as well. And that's it for my board report.
Well, now here it comes. It's my turn. Anyway, I too was at Ryan's race, and I was directing the runners, and I will tell you, I chose in the morning, which is worse when you're soaked, jeans or leggings. Well, I can tell you they're both soaked, and they are not comfortable. So that was for about 2 hours, and I was soaked to the skin. I left there and went to one of our 8th grade students at Sunset Ridge, Brendan Salisbury, who is 14 and earned his Eagle Scout status, which is incredible because I don't believe most people are 14 when they earn that. And he's such an awesome guy, and he might have a mom that works in our district. So that was fun. Was at Boulder Creek today for their cultural festival. I did work with Mrs. O'Brien, and I can tell you, after being on this board for almost 12 full years, I have tried to do that every year, and I finally got somebody to help me, and we're all going to get that board book together, because it's not just for new board members, it's for people that think that they want to do it, and it's also for present board members to remind themselves why we're really here. Let's see what else. So, there's like a million other things that I've done on different campuses and employee groups. But what I wanted to say, when I'm out on the campuses or in the departments, you observe, you hear, you listen, and sometimes you're joining in on the festivities, so to speak. It is so awesome to be on our campuses. Our kids are polite. Our employees are helpful. Even when they want to pull maybe my hair out or someone else's, you just can't even tell, because it's such a natural thing for them to be on their campus. And it's just a wonderful thing to be in Deer Valley. So, Dr. Finch, you're next.
A couple things, as Ms. Ordway alluded to, we are floating by hotspots today, not by hardwire. When we live next to a construction zone and there are backhoes running around, every once in a while, backhoe cuts up fiber. Well, cutting a fiber is a big deal. So I want to say a special thanks to Brian Boone and Dean Brandt. They were scrambling here 2 hours ago, trying to get us online. So thanks to them, we're rolling. So thanks to IS for adjusting, and for Miss Sheila organizing all of it, getting it going, getting us all motivated to get our technology working. So thanks to the IS&T in particular. I did have a chance to attend the AASA, the National Superintendent's Conference, and speak to my colleagues about the use of social media. And quite in that kind of environment, when you're working with really schools from around the country, you hear a lot about different issues that they deal with, and being able to have some years on us and some experience with social media was helpful to lead that session. Enjoyed that. Also, just a reminder, we have the students, the Superintendent Summit coming up on Thursday, and my sponsor, my leader, had to head to Washington, so I'm going to be running in charge. So it should be, we've got a 70-30 chance of being awesome. So come out and see it. It'll be Thursday at Barry Goldwater High School. Yes, question.
I have a question.
Yep.
Does our district art exhibition start
it's coming
Friday,
the arts. Yeah, thanks for that reminder. We have up at the Anthem outlets, you can go in and check out the student art. It's in the back part of the outlets. Starts on Friday, and I will be purchasing for the district awards from each level. So that's the art that you see in the building. And so come out and check it out. Some great student art.
Sunday?
It's through Sunday. 2 weekends.
2 weekends.
Yep.
Woohoo!
Up in the Anthem outlets. That's it.
Yes, Dr. Z.
President Ordway, too, I just wanted to say for the folks in the audience and those that are watching, a reminder that this is National Public School Week as well. And so I hope folks will get on social media, on Twitter, and see our hashtags for Public School Proud and Public School Week 2020, because there's a lot of great things that are happening and folks are sharing that all over. So I just want to make sure that was mentioned.
Well, you're awesome. Thank you, because I think every week is National Public School Week. Okay, we'll make it special. So is this Dr. Galligan?
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. This evening, we are pleased to highlight one of our strongest business and district partnerships with Southwest Behavioral and Health Services. Mrs. Sarah Gurton, Deer Valley's Southwest Behavioral Service Program Coordinator, joins me in sharing information and impact of this partnership with students, families, and Deer Valley schools. Also in attendance in the audience, and I want to recognize them, are Miss Allison Zatarga, Program Director, and Mr. Ed McClelland, Vice President of Community Services, both of whom have made this partnership vibrant and here in Deer Valley.
Could we see who they are so we can thank them? All right, that's the last time I'll do that to you. Thank you.
Studies have shown that the value of developing comprehensive school-based mental health programs in helping students achieve academically and have access to experiences that build social skills, leadership, self-awareness, and caring connections to adults in their schools and communities are most important. Schools that choose to collaborate with community partners, such as Southwest Behavioral Services, have found that they can enhance the academic success of individual students. These partnerships have found to significantly improve school-wide truancy and discipline rates, increase the rates of high school graduation, and help create positive school environments in which a student can learn and be successful in Southwest Behavioral and Health Services in order to provide an additional level of mental health support to students and families in our district. Southwest Behavioral Services provides a master's doctorate level clinician who is located on a Deer Valley campus. The clinician is able to work collaboratively with administration, teaching staff, paraprofessional staff, and families in order to provide a comprehensive level of support to Deer Valley students. Some of the supports include skill-building groups for socialization skills, emotional regulation, anger management with enrolled clients. Counseling and additional services are available for our students enrolled in Southwest Behavioral and Health enrollment programs. Enrollment is available to every student in Deer Valley. As you can see, our partnership started with 6 schools and has grown to 19 schools over the past 3 years. Last spring, we worked with Southwest Behavioral Services to envision an added partnership specific to our 5 high schools. The outcome of that work was the addition of 5 wellness counselors, 1 at each high school. This particular partnership is unique in that the wellness counselors are funded in half by Southwest Behavioral Health Services and in half by Deer Valley through Title IV funding. The wellness counselors are different from the clinicians at our K-8 schools in that they work with both high school students in crisis who are not formally enrolled in services, as well as students who become enrolled in mental health services through Southwest Behavioral Health Services. The K-8 clinicians only work with students and families who have formally enrolled in mental health services. However, all students and their families are eligible for services. As we look to the 2020 school year, we would like to move the wellness counselor model down to our true middle schools, as well as add a K-6 school and a K-8 school. And the best thing is that Southwest truly is a partner for students and adults in our school, and they consider themselves part of the Deer Valley family, which is truly a gift. In addition to the 19 schools who receive direct support, including a wellness counselor or clinician on their campus, students at 14 other schools have received support from a clinician. Those campuses include Terramar, Desert Sage, Copper Creek, North Terra Canyon, Desert Sky Middle School, Sunset Ridge, Diamond Canyon, Highland Lakes, West Wing, New River, Mountain Shadows, Mirage, Canyon Springs, and Greenbrier. In addition, Pathways last year had the support of 2 of the wellness counselors also. So what that means is our partnership with Southwest Behavioral Health and Services over the past 3 years has supported students and families from 33 of our campuses and one of our programs. That is an amazing gift again. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now.
Hello. The following slide here, we have just a sort of a breakdown of how many students have been serviced on each of the high school campuses, and this was for the fall 2019 semester. And as you can see, it's broken down per high school. The total number at the top, for example, Barry Goldwater High School, 100 students. That covers all of the students who have been enrolled in ongoing counseling, and then all of the students who have been perhaps what we call checked in with, meaning referred for one reason or another by identified by a staff member on campus and referred to the wellness counselor for check-ins or maybe crisis management or ongoing enrollment in counseling services. And then you can see we've kind of broken it up on each campus. The wellness counselor position on the high school campuses is what we consider a hybrid position, meaning half of their workload, half of their day is dedicated to enrolled students within Southwest Behavioral Health. And we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means. All of the wellness counselors are full-time on the campuses. They're there Monday through Friday. They offer individual counseling, family counseling, group counseling, and then, as I mentioned, crisis management or check-in services as well. The caseload typically runs enrolled, so students and families that the wellness counselors are meeting with on a weekly basis, it's usually about 15 to 20, with the remainder of their day dedicated to things that pop up, for example, any student with an immediate need or a crisis or emergency or something like that. This next slide is more for the K-8 clinician support. So we broke this one up by region. And as you can see, this is how many students were serviced in each region. The clinicians on the K-8 campuses act a little bit differently. So their role is based entirely on enrolled students with Southwest Behavioral Health. So they don't have the same crisis immediate need role as the wellness counselors do at the high school level. So these students are all who've been identified by a staff member on campus at the K6 as perhaps having an ongoing mental health need. They enroll with us, and then they see the wellness counselors on campus on typically a weekly basis. And again, that's a full-time position for each clinician, although they do divide their time between 1, 2, maybe 3 different K through 8 campuses. So the flow of services, and I won't read it word for word here, but essentially to think about, what might a parent and student expect from counseling services. At the K-8 level, there's an identified need by a staff member on campus. That need is then reported to the clinician on their assigned clinician on their campus. And then that clinician will outreach to that student's guardian, whoever that may be, discuss services, talk about availability, what things look like, and then schedule an intake session. At that intake session, they would then enroll with Southwest Behavioral Health, release forms, confidentiality agreements, things like that. Once they're enrolled, the clinician can then see that student as needed on campus, like I mentioned, about once a week, and then also meet with families. We hold what are called child and family team meetings, which can include school staff, teachers, guidance, APs, really any stakeholder that's on board with helping that student. We can also then provide crisis services if needed for that student. And we review progress on a consistent, regular basis with the families and the student, and then continue to provide ongoing care until that need is no longer there. If when we reach out to a family, if they're already enrolled with another behavioral health provider, we can collaborate with those existing providers and provide like support skills or strategies, other things on campus if they already have, a primary therapist for that family. The high school wellness, it's a little bit different. It starts the same with an identified need. They're referred to the wellness counselor, who then checks his or her first step is to check in with the student and get a little bit more information about perhaps what's going on and what the mental health need might be. Based on that initial meeting, they might suggest, hey, this is something that perhaps I can help with. Let's get enrolled so that we can have scheduled, consistent weekly individual sessions, incorporate the family, have family sessions, those kind of things. If perhaps it's not quite to that caliber, what that wellness clinician might do then is have maybe weekly or biweekly just check-ins with that student. They wouldn't enroll with Southwest Behavioral Health, but the clinician then the wellness counselor would then follow up with that student on a regular basis until they've either resolved that need or moved forward with another appropriate service. When we talk about discharging from services, the length of stay in services varies. We like to say, I think it's about an average about 6 months or so, but that varies. So we looked at how many students, how many clients were discharged from services, and that is only the clients that have been enrolled. So that wouldn't include any of the students that were just checked in upon. Discharges can include successful completion of treatment. They've met their counseling goals, families are all on board, and we discontinue services. It might mean they moved out of the area. It might mean we've lost contact with the student or the family, or perhaps they've transferred to another agency. Anyone that's enrolled, in order to be discharged, they have to be enrolled first, and the bullet points go over the minimum of services if they're enrolled. They have an initial assessment. Every enrolled client develops a service plan, a safety support plan. They will receive individual, family, and or group counseling, child and family team meetings, and perhaps psychiatric or other services offered by our outpatient clinics, which we have all over the valley.
So the clinicians and wellness counselors have noted trends in mental health referrals and check-ins across all of our levels. You will note some commonalities between the K-8 schools and the high school population students. A strength of the support provided by Southwest Health is the family support, as Sarah mentioned, and then overall counseling. As you can see, at all levels, family conflict or relationships raised to the top for the referrals at both high school and K-8. The chart that you see there is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and that chart shows, based on the age level of children, which of those behaviors, disorders pop up. And you can tell, especially for high school, as we've noted in what our wellness counselors identified, that depression and anxiety and then just overall behavior tend to be higher at middle and high school. With the help, though, of Southwest Behavioral Health, we are better able to identify health concerns and provide appropriate services for children and their families quickly. And we know that this partnership will make a difference in the lives of children with mental disorders. Today we met with the counseling department chairs and the 5 wellness counselors and Sarah. And toward the end of the meeting, our high school counselors said that the benefit to the campus is that they feel a sense of security, that they won't make a bad decision, that they have support from someone who has training. And that's from our guidance counselors. And they believe strongly that this has added a layer that is just well worth anything that we've been able to do for it. What you'll also notice here are specific quotes, and I won't read those, but I'll give you just a second to kind of glance at them. And these are from a parent, a DV staff member, and then one of our counselors. Yes. And Sarah has a quote also from a student. I'm going to ask her to read that for you.
And this is a student who's still currently enrolled. The student stated that counseling at school has helped me immensely with breaking out of my shell. The blinders that made me focus only on the negative are more or less gone, and I'm an all-around happier person now.
Amazing. Over the past 3 years, we have been blessed to have many students who may not have had access to services receive necessary care in our K-8 schools primarily before, but this year specifically our high schools as well. Our school-based program is a safe place for children and families to receive support that they may not have sought out on their own. Another thing to note is that each school is unique, and as such, the support is tailored to that campus and community, thereby meeting their unique needs for the students and families. For example, when our wellness counselors came on board, each of them met initially with the principal just to find out a little bit about the community and the culture of that campus. And each of the 5 wellness counselors had a different community to become a part of. And I think Sarah would also agree that although the 5 wellness counselors have a similar background and experience, their campus that they work with encourages them and needs them in different ways. However, we have that baseline care. Lastly, the positive impact for our high school students, as we just said, in crisis or with anxiety and suicide, ideation is immeasurable, and the hybrid model that we've been able to work with our Title IV funding and Southwest Behavioral Health has truly made an impact not only for the students who need care through intake and services, but for those students who need a little TLC, but who could easily and quickly move into a more prevalent mental health concern. So it's just it's been a gift for us with high school this year. As I mentioned before, the 3 people that have really been instrumental in the last 2.5 years, but specifically this year as well, is Ed McClelland. And Ed, if you would stand up one more time. Allison Zatarga.
He's
and then
shaking his
Sarah
head
Girton.
no, but yet his feet are making him stand.
Please
Good.
stand up. Thank you very much.
I have just a couple of questions. First of all, it's the impact I can hear it throughout the different communities. With the caseload that we have now, do we have wait lists at the high school?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And then do high school students have the availability to self-refer or sign up for a walk-in, or does it have to be
They always
referred
have the
by-
option to walk in. I mean, anybody could come up to the counseling office and say, I'd like to speak with the wellness counselor. As far as the referral process goes, they could still do that and then meet or not enrollment moving forward is appropriate and what the next steps would be.
And this may seem obvious, but since wellness counselor has counselor in it, have we been able to clearly differentiate the difference between our counselors that mostly will do our guidance for academics, and do we make that distinction, and does our staff know
yes,
who
most
they are?
certainly. The guidance counselors, although they may be sort of the first line to identify a need with a student, if they're able to, resolve the issue relatively quickly on their own, they would. But any other issue, they would refer that to the wellness counselor.
No, I'm sure the counselors know who the wellness counselors are.
Oh, do the student?
Wellness counselor is.
We try to keep the referral process as streamlined as possible so that they're all kind of going, if a teacher notices a need or another staff member, they would typically then reach out to the guidance department, who would then set the ball in motion for a referral toward the wellness counselor.
Yeah, because this service is, I think, going to be called invaluable. Have them, and maybe we can increase them at the high school, because I don't know that one on a high school with 25 or 2,600 kids is enough. But anyway, I just said that. That I think the parents also need to know that is something that's available.
And that's, I mean, essentially that's the mission. It's certainly not a secret. And I think the longer the wellness counselors are on campus, the more and more community members, parents, students, I know the students are aware because they will drop in, a friend told me or so-and-so told me. So the word is definitely getting out. Most of the wellness counselors have been introduced to the staff, like at the beginning of the year at a staff meeting, things like that.
All right, thank
I just had a quick question, but thank you for all the great information. On the page that had the enrolled by region, it looked like compared to the other regions, Sandra Day O'Connor region only had 2 students enrolled. And I was just curious. Girls. Go back. I just saw the page.
That
Yeah,
slide.
what did you see? 66, 16, 25, 21, 2.
So
Isn't the K-8 previously enrolled?
That's the
let me get here.
clinician.
So,
Clinician.
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, if you notice, most of the schools that we have had for the last 2.5 years fall in the Goldwater region and or Deer Valley region. So the support schools, the 14 schools that I mentioned, when a single student or a student comes up in crisis, then we network with Southwest Behavioral Health and a clinician at one of the schools that they reside on to support that student. So that could very well be why you saw only 2.
The 2 was an outlier. I just was curious the reason for that. Or if you didn't know, you could put it in the board update. I was just curious why they 2.
Could you go back to the slide that listed the schools, please, Dr.
Certainly.
Galligan? If you look at this slide, none of the schools except for Sandra Day O'Connor are from, I believe, the Sandra Day O'Connor region.
And that slide is specifically the K-8s. So
Right.
that the 2 doesn't refer to any of the referrals or enrolled kiddos from the high from Sandra Day O'Connor. It's just K-8s in the Sandra Day O'Connor region.
Oh, okay. So are they going to get more clinicians in that area region, or is it just?
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, in general, when we talk with Southwest Behavioral Health, we bring them data on student need. And the schools that you see there have had the greatest student need, and that's how it was determined that those schools there would have a specific clinician on their campus. When the need arises, so for example, when you look at 2020 and we look at Desert Sage and Terramar as potential expansion, that's because we have noted that those 2 schools seem to have need this year for additional mental health support. And so in our discussion and talks with Ed and Allison, those are the 2 schools, other than our hope for the true middle schools, to be brought on next year. That doesn't negate that a child who has a need at one of the other schools, we reach out and we will provide that support. In addition, even at our high schools, we had a high school student at Boulder Creek who we were not able to provide services. Sarah, you might be able to explain that a little better. But we were able to work with that student with our O'Connor wellness counselor.
There was a student identified at Boulder Creek that would benefit from counseling services. However, it was the child of a staff member at Boulder Creek, which presents a conflict of interest for our wellness clinician to provide services to that student. So what we did is outreach to the other high schools in the area that have wellness counselors to say which other wellness counselor might be able to take this on. And so we transferred those counseling services to another high school campus where that conflict of interest didn't lie.
But to get back to your original question about 2 students receiving clinician support, it's simply because the schools may not have reached out with need for an individual student at the O'Connor campuses.
But then O'Connor campuses also have And they're as aware of the supports as the other schools?
Every one of our schools is aware of Southwest Behavioral Health and reach out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, Mrs. O'Brien.
Can we just get a copy of the presentation? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
When we get the internet,
Oh, enough. Enough.
2021.
Stop.
thank you, Dr.
Anyway,
Finch.
thank you so much. That
Thank you
was
all.
just great. Thank you. Oh, look at Heather biting at that microphone. Go ahead.
Good evening, President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. We'll be queuing up our presentation. This is going to be a duo presentation with Mr. Migliorino and I. We recently had the pleasure of finishing our work. We published the district budget priorities. The committee was comprised of and the charge of the committee is to develop the recommendation for budget priorities from 2021 for the 2021 fiscal year. This is my first year serving on the committee. I think Mr. Migliorino has chaired it for the past 2 or 3 years. And talk about work being fun. I'm not ashamed to admit, actually, I had a little bit fun with this committee, and it was a great group of folks. We started our first meeting on December 4th. Recommendations from the prior committee, the recommendations that had been made for the 1920, the current fiscal year, as kind of a precursor for the committee to see what it was expected of them and what their charge was. That was followed by a rousing 2-hour presentation of School Finance 101. We'll ask the committee members if they agree with that assessment of the presentation. But part of the reason for School Finance 101 is basically just the explanation of how the district is funded, and with specifically focused on our budget being funded by students and our budget being finite. That if we could fund everything that all of our stakeholders wanted, certainly we would try and do that. But because our pot of money that we have from the state is finite, we go through this process to try and make sure that we can focus on what our stakeholders want and need when we're developing the budget for next year. Following the December 4th meeting, we had the first input survey. That was the narrative input survey. So we basically started with the blank slate, and with the help of Dr. Scott Smith, sent out the survey that basically had a blank line. Please tell us, parents, community members, staff members, what are your budget priorities for the district for 2021? We received, I think, about 1,700 responses. It was a little bit less than what we had expected, but then the committee came back together on January 22nd, and we poured over the pages and pages of narrative results. Dr. Smith had done some preliminary work for us. See in our 2 hours what it was that our stakeholders were looking for. Following that, we sent out the forced ranking survey. So the output from the January 22nd meeting was the list of priorities for ranking. There's no set number that the committee is supposed to come up with, but I think we came up with 10. And I really want to commend the committee as well. They were very dedicated to making sure the language in the forced ranking survey and the priorities that you'll see here shortly were representative of the input that we had received from stakeholders. The meetings are supposed to be 2 hours. The last 2 meetings were 2.5, give or take, because the committee was not going to leave just because time was up. They really wanted to make sure that they respected the wishes of the stakeholders and that the output that we had was representative of that. Then our final meeting was February 19th, so not too long ago. And from that, the committee reviewed the forced ranking survey and came up with the budget priorities. I would like to also shout out that some of the ways that we did to publish the surveys. We spoke with the parent organization groups, the interfaith groups, any group that we could get in front of. If I was in front of the accounting clerks, I was telling them about the surveys. But we actually started including the surveys and information about the committee work in Deer Valley Voice. And I might have been, I don't often cheer out loud at work, but when Monica told us yesterday, actually, that the 2 weeks ago when we had the article about the committee in Deer Valley Voice, was it the number one clicked on specific story for that Deer Valley Voice? The Finance Friday update was the number one clicked on story. I was very excited. And I don't know if I'm the only one, but
No, we're all as excited as you, Heather.
however, I do have to say that was not where we got most of our employee responses. We did do a direct email to employees as well to send out the survey link to make sure that we got feedback from as many of them as possible. All right, going too far. So the budget committee members, we had representatives from, we tried to get representatives from every region. It was co-chaired by Mr. Migliorino and I. We had representatives from administrators, the Deer Valley Education Association, the Deer Valley Education Support Personnel Association, and we did not update her name, even though DVEF says to be determined. The Honorable Marie Brennan served on the committee with us as well, and we had a couple of representatives from our parent organization group, business partners, and interfaith representation as well. If there are any committee members here, I know Alex is here. Is there anyone else behind me? Is Brittany still here?
Marie's there, but she's not talking because she's sick.
If you want to stand to be recognized for serving with us on the committee, we are very appreciative of the work you did. So with that, these are the top 10 priorities that came from the narrative survey. These are in no particular order. And I will start with the top bullet. The increase to the staff to student ratio, that was very specific language that we struggled over as a committee that actually we had, might have caused us a little bit of confusion as well. Increase is meant to support staff. And some thought perhaps increase was meant to support students. It's increase the staff to student ratio. And the reason the committees chose this specifically is because we do receive a lot of responses to lower class size. Lowering class size by a significant amount is incredibly expensive. It's $1.4 million for every student across the district at all levels to reduce class size. And in order then to make it significant, we would have to multiply that 1.4 million by, let's say, 5 students, give or take, to make a difference in a teacher's classroom. So the committee did not want to put on the forced ranking survey something that we might not be able to actually give to the stakeholders. So the increased staff to student ratio is putting in some of those supports, whether they're academic supports, whether they're behavioral supports to help teachers in the classroom. So that was what was meant by that specific bullet. Others were salary increases for teachers or salary increases for all employees, provide additional academic supports for students. Some of what we've already seen here tonight, increasing the counseling support for students, additional monetary supports for the arts, support for extracurricular and co-curricular activities, increasing the social emotional learning for students, increased safety and student safety, including behavioral supports, and increasing special education supports. These top 10 were very similar to what we had seen from the 1920 Budget Priority Committee. I think one thing that was on that ranking that did not make it here was additional capital support. But with that, after we had these 10, top 10 is when we distributed the forced ranking survey, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Migliorino to speak about those results.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. As Ms. Mock mentioned, the second survey was our forced ranking survey, which we've done over the past couple years. We received over 2,780 responses to that forced ranking survey, in which the respondents had to select their top 5 priorities amongst those 10 that were just mentioned. 55% of the respondents were parents of those that responded. An additional 14% were both employees and parents. So we had quite a large representation that included some form of parental involvement as we asked that, and it's self-reported when they complete that information. This was just kind of, another shout out again to Dr. Smith, who helps us with all of our survey needs, as well as some of the analytics that come back from the results. So this is a heat map that kind of shows what the responses showed in aggregate form. And basically the highest ranked responses that you can see there: salary increase for teachers, salary increase for all employees, increase the staff to student ratio, safety and student safety, as well as finally provide additional academic support for students. Those were the top 5 highest ranked responses. And then the lowest ranked responses: additional monetary supports for the arts, bless you, increased social emotional learning, district support for extracurricular and co-curricular activities, increased counseling support, and special education supports were amongst the 5 lowest respondents, again, in aggregated form. We then broke it down by group. So, was there, one group that had a different opinion than another? And just some observations that we made here. Salary increases in general, supported by all groups. Parents ranked the salary increase for all employees lower than all the other groups, which was interesting, as opposed to salary increase specifically for teachers. Additional monetary supports for the arts was ranked low by all groups. And community members, although a small sample size, I think there were only 7 respondents from the community, ranked increasing social and emotional supports for students higher than any other group that responded. We then looked, at the data to say how many number 1 responses did we have, how many were in the top 5, again, because we asked for their top 5 responses. And you can see the data here pretty much follows in suit with each other with the previous results that we shared. We did have a narrative open-ended response in the forced ranking survey, just in case they didn't have an opportunity to complete the first survey or if they wanted to make some sort of comment. So here's a Wordle just kind of drawing out the key words from that narrative. So you can see teachers and students and salary, those types of things showed up most frequently in those narrative responses, as you might expect. So from all of that, the committee digested this information. They looked at all the narrative reports. I think the narrative report in true Jim font was, smaller than 6 point and still was 18 to 19 pages in length. We looked through all of those and came up with these recommendations, kind of centered around 4 main thoughts. The first of which is competitive salaries and wages for all employees. And we did spend some time, wordsmithing some of these because we've in the past we've had, we wanted to increase salaries, or we wanted to address things like hard to fill, or get very specific. And again, because these are priorities, we wanted to make sure that, and the committee, felt, I think unanimously, that just inserting the word competitive wages meant that we would have to make sure that the wage was commensurate with the work that is being done. So if that needs to include, some type of adjustment, then so be it, whether that's hard to fill or whatever. But to make sure that if we're offering a competitive salary for our employees, then we should be able to address some of the things that come as byproducts, where we have vacancies that can't be filled and things of that nature. But specifically, they wanted to make sure that we reestablish some classified pay ranges to address compression created by the minimum wage increases. And I know the NST group is currently working on this. And I've mentioned, I think, in several settings, I don't know if it's been in a board meeting, but we looked, and just over 40% of all of our classified staff currently make $12 an hour. That's not that they're in a position that should make $12 an hour. They currently earn $12 an hour. And that's just because of the compression that's been caused. And that's, again, over 40% of our classified staff, not of the entire staff in the district. The second key thought was provide additional academic supports for students. And this specifically was provide supports for large student settings. And many of the committee members felt that, again, reducing class size, as Ms. Mock mentioned, is an expensive venture, but making sure that there are supports in place for not only when we're exceeding maybe a class load number that we might have, whether that's in a homeroom classroom or any of the other staffing models that we use, but maybe as we're approaching some of those numbers, that there's a mechanism to provide those supports. And we think that might be more affordable than trying to just lower the class size number because that may not have the greatest impact we feel on students. The second sub-bullet under providing academic supports was enhancing special education, special programs for students, including special education, gifted, STEM, STEAM programs of that nature, because of the benefit that we've seen and some of the needs that are expressed within these areas. And specifically, we saw a lot of comments related to gifted education amongst the narrative responses that we received. Third key idea behind this recommendation was provide additional social emotional supports for students and providing supports that would cultivate a positive learning environment, whether that was related to behavioral issues, maybe academic issues and whatnot, the supports to be able to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be in a positive learning environment. And then finally, and we chose this word specifically, expand on the existing safety measures because safety was one of the things that was noted in, again, many of the comments. But expanding on those measures because we wanted to acknowledge the fact that we do have many of those measures in place. There was some realization amongst the committee members that maybe not all of those are known well by the community as a whole. And that may be in some ways intentional. We don't want to necessarily share every precaution that we take just so that we don't give the bad guys the playbook, so to speak. But not only expanding on those safety measures that are on campus, but also addressing some of these things that where some of the safety issues can arise off campus as well. And I know that Dr. Zurbach and his team is already working on many of these things as we speak. And so really that was the recommendation that came from this committee. In terms of next steps, we bring this to you so that you can provide some input as we conclude the presentation. But just in terms of next steps, we'd like to include this in the process that involves many other input processes to be able to help develop next year's budget. So this is just kind of a roadmap of what we think the community and you saw the stakeholders that were represented on this committee that they believe should be the priorities that when we are establishing the budget, which we intend to bring to you hopefully in June of this coming year for next fiscal year, which will start in July. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mrs. O'Brien.
Mrs. Mock, could you go over the formula again that you would use to calculate how much it would cost to lower class size?
Sure. We actually have built into the Gold Book, we have a calculator in there that actually by lowering class size by 1 can tell us how many teachers that we would add. Mm-hmm. And then we use our average teacher salary then to determine what that cost would be, adding benefits, adding health benefits, matching benefits to that. It's a little different for middle school and high school because those are based on a ratio, a slightly different ratio. And so then we just calculate by hand based off of the number of students that we believe we will have next year off the projection, lowering that ratio by 1 student. And that gives us then the increase in FTE that we would hope to realize, and just using then the average teacher salary at that point.
So could we have in the next Friday update what that approximate cost would be to lower it? Because I think that we do hear often from our community members that they want to lower the class size. What I don't think they understand when they ask that question is how much it truly costs. And so it's important for our community, all stakeholders, our staff, as well as our community members, to understand what the trade-off would be if we were to actually look at lowering class size. So if we could have that number in the Friday update, and maybe next time talk about that, what that number is in a
Absolutely.
budget update, that would be wonderful.
Yes, Ms. Tweedy.
Well, I guess I just want to piggyback on Miss O'Brien's question because I don't understand that calculation only simply because when I've gone into classrooms, throughout the district, I would see a number of classrooms that aren't even close to the load we have now. They're actually pretty far under. So even if we lowered the class size, we would not have that. For the most part, it would be a non-issue because there's very few. Do you understand? Like, in order to do that calculation accurately, you would have to calculate how many classes would be impacted by the new load. Then you can't assume all classes would be impacted by the load.
President Ordway, Miss Tweedy, that is correct. And that's actually, the Gold Book does that for us. And so those classrooms that are already under, or those grade levels at any school that are already under, would not trigger then based on the calculation. And so it's only going to calculate those classrooms or those schools that lowering class size by one student would add an additional teacher at that level.
So you figured that out in the calculation.
Correct.
Because
It's all
even-
part of the budget book, the Gold Book. And it's basically the same formula that we use for projecting staffing for the coming year, just by changing that student input number for the class levels by one.
So if you change the class levels by one to hit $1 million, the $1.4 million, how many classes are you saying would be triggered by that? Because
That I don't know off the top of my
seems
head.
like we're basing it on every classroom to hit that number.
That is not correct.
Okay, so can you tell me
I
how?
think Jim's going to do some quick math. We might be able to give you approximately how many FTE. It'd be about 24 classrooms. The 1.4 million would be 24.
would just be for 24 classrooms?
24 additional teachers, yes,
Cost $1 million
across the district. 1.4.
1.4 for 24 teachers.
Correct.
Okay, and so you're trying to come up with a plan. You guys are trying to come up with a plan then that would look like what to address the overcrowding in some classrooms?
That would be up to the budget input process and the governing board on what that plan might look like, whether it would be a 1 year. If you wanted to put enough money into 1 year to make that class size come down more than one student for our current ratio, or if it was something you wanted to do year by year to eventually make a difference. But we use the input processes to determine what that might be. I don't know if
Yes, Ms. Moffett, you may speak, please.
And there are,
Ms. Reed.
President Ordway, governing board members, there are a variety of ways that it could be approached. What Ms. Maka is referring to is looking at the whole K-6 system, and the day that she runs that would be 24 classrooms. I remember the board asking me a similar question when we were doing Plus in the fall. What would it cost, rather than adding an aide, to add a teacher to each of those sections instead? And it was $1.5 million at that time. So that is about right at any given time. That would be the cost. What Ms. Mock also mentioned is that you would want to make a difference, or I'm assuming the committee would want to make a decision where the teachers would feel a difference. And sometimes changing that by one student doesn't necessarily make it feel a whole lot different. But Ms. Tweedy, your point is also true. We have many classrooms across our system that are sitting well under that limit.
Ms. Reed?
We've had a couple of discussions since the last year that I've been on the board about a district committee coming together to look at ways that would make sense to minimize certain numbers. So specifically for let's say sixth graders that have larger bodies that make the classroom feel bigger. Maybe looking at reducing, a number there, or putting it back into the hands of teachers and different district personnel that would have better firsthand knowledge of what would make a difference. Because I think that when we talk about lowering class sizes, or parents or communities, or we read articles about lowering class sizes, people are wanting to lower class sizes dramatically. And when I say dramatically, I mean by 5 students or 3 students. And so I think that we're almost speaking 2 different languages from what community members and parents might expect to lower class sizes, and what we're saying when we're talking about lowering 1 student across a grade level, across the district, or 1 student across the district as in general. So my suggestion might be to maybe have more of an in-depth conversation at a different time as far as what lowering class sizes actually looks like, what it actually costs, and making sure that our different stakeholder groups, that we're all understanding and speaking the same language, so we can have intellectual conversation about it, rather than just throwing out numbers and not having all of the data in front.
Well, and because our district has so many different configurations, what works in one campus might not work in another. So that's a great idea. Go ahead, Mrs.
And
Ms.
just to
Frank.
extend on what Mrs. Reed said, that's a completely different animal at the high schools. I think when people say, well, lower class sizes by 1 or 2 students at the elementary, kids aren't generally moving from class to class, but at the high school, it's going to be dependent on who needs which credits to graduate. So it's a completely different issue at the high school level. And then I did have a question on the bullet point, competitive salaries and wages of employees. When you look at the word competitive, what does that mean? Or what does that mean to you?
Yes. Alex Trebek, what does that mean to you?
President Ordway, Ms. Frank. I don't know if you're asking my personal opinion or what the committee felt.
Personal.
The committee.
Committee.
The
what
committee.
were their thoughts?
The committee specifically looked at a bunch of data, specifically some of the comparable data that we share with the governing board as well. From the Auditor General Classroom Spending Report, has average teacher salary on there, has class size numbers on there, and I think from all of that data that they digested in a very short amount of period of time, they thought, hey, just make sure that it's competitive as compared to the marketplace, so that the salary was commensurate with the work that they're asking to be done, and so that there would not be maybe attracted to go to another place that would be a positive monetary gain for an employee, so that we would be able to retain and attract employees to be able to do the work.
So would you be looking specifically at, say, surrounding districts close to Deer Valley, where someone that presumably lived in this area might be tempted to go? Because you can hide a lot of things in an average.
Yes, and specifically, we do look at that now. So we've done that we actually commissioned the board, might have been a different board, but commissioned a study that looked at comparable data
Right.
For salaries. We, one of the things that we're fortunate to receive is the Auditor General report that does publish an average teacher salary, and we can look specifically at the districts that we think that we compare well with, that are like districts, not that we compare well with, but that are good comparison districts for our to base a competitive analysis off of. And so we continue to do that, and I think that was they thought we could summarize all of the previous inputs that were from prior committees about hard to fill positions and things like that by just inserting the word competitive, to make sure that the salary that we're offering to our employees is a competitive package that would actually retain and fill those positions. So we hopefully can eliminate some of the vacancies, which is one of the struggles that we have, because there are so many other options for people to elect, especially when it came to minimum wage specifically. There's a lot of, I mentioned that 40% of our staff they're all making $12 an hour. That's not uncommon in the marketplace right now. There are a great high percentage of people that are all making $12 an hour because they were making $8 an hour just 3 or 4 years ago. So.
Yeah. Well, personally, I like the use of the word competitive as opposed to hard to fill, because when you get into things like hard to fill, then it excludes people. When you say it's competitive, that would be inclusive of all employees receiving a wage that's competitive to comparable districts. So thank you for that clarification, and I appreciate the use of that word.
Awesome.
If I could add,
No, you may not. No, go
short,
ahead. I'm
30
kidding.
seconds. You are all on the right trail. We're digesting all the community and staff input and using the Auditor General, and many of you have ever referred to that or the data that we can compare. Because remember, we spend a lot of effort comparing against the Big Eight. That's what I call them, the Peorias and Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, Dysart, etc. We use these numbers, what Ms. Frank is referring to them as bulk numbers. They're big numbers because they come from a statewide perspective, but they do give us a temperature. So we look for trends over time, and if you've seen Mr. Miglorino's and Ms. Mock's presentations as we compare with our neighbors, we are, at least 2 years ago, I don't know the latest data, but we have the lowest student-teacher class ratio against the Big Eight. And so that tells us something. It's not because of the many different configurations. We have to drill down and find out, like high school versus middle school versus K-8s versus K-6s, etc. So that gives us a starting point. But in general, our temperature for class sizes are competitive, I guess is my point.
All right. Thank you. So I think we can move to 7D.
Okay, so item 7D. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the principal of Canyon Springs, April Fraley.
April.
Wait a minute. There's stuff to do first. Somebody second that motion.
Second.
President Ordway, governing
Yes,
board
ma'am.
members, Dr. Finch, and audience. April Fraley. Go ahead and stand one more time, April. April, assistant principal in the
Not
Deer
yet.
Valley
We haven't
District.
voted yet, but okay.
And we are excited to now officially have her for next year as the principal of Canyon.
Almost officially. We're not there yet.
Congratulations.
Okay, so can we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Now it's official. So. And thank you, family members of April and staff members for. There's like 20 of them in the 2 rows over there. Mrs. Graham holding the door open for them. Thank you. You could leave now if you really want to.
Or you can stay.
Or you can stay. All right, moving on to
Now we know how interesting.
our public comment.
There are no public comments.
Oh, there are. Well, look at that. We are going to move to consent or old business.
Item 5A, I move that, wait, I'm on the wrong item, sorry. There it is. I move that the governing board approves school year 2021-22 district calendar, and they left out which option, so I guess that means we'll have a discussion.
We need a second.
Don't we need
Second.
No, we need to pick a letter.
And there's a presentation.
Dr. Smith.
Well,
Thank you. Good evening, President Ordway.
but wait,
We still need a second.
We got to stop.
Second.
No, you can't. You can't second I don't know what we're talking about yet. So we're going to pick a letter. Just pick a letter. Read it over
B.
again. Read the whole thing over again, please.
I move that the governing board approves school year 2021-22 district calendar option B.
I second.
Let's have discussion. Dr. Smith.
President Ordway, members of the governing board, I the
Yeah, go ahead.
pleasure
Sure.
of bringing back the calendar presentation. Miss Meyer is out of town and could not be here tonight. This presentation is exactly the same presentation you saw before, so I'm not going to go through all the individual items, with the exception of one slide. Here you can see the things that were considered as they built the calendar. The committee built the calendar, and they had 3 options. You asked that we survey our stakeholders or our employees on whether to choose option B or option C. And the big tell here are the survey results. Broken down by certified, classified, school administrator, and then the total. Blue is option B, red is option C, and it's pretty much a 60-40 split across the board. If you have any questions, I'd be willing to answer.
You picked the right one, Miss Ring.
We have no questions? Anybody want to comment before we take a vote? As the motion stands, we would be approving option B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, look at that. Alrighty then. We will move to consent agenda, please.
I move that the governing board approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Abstain.
All right, let's move to, pardon me? No votes. Oh, yeah, I forgot that. Oh, whatever.
I voted.
Okay, let's go to 7A.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
I second.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Wow, 7B.
Oh, we got to vote.
We did. Oh,
Hasn't come up yet.
hasn't come up yet. Oh. That's funny.
Okay, so now we're to 7C.
E, after we vote for 7A.
We didn't. Oh.
Did it pop up for everyone?
Mine's 7B.
Mine says 7B, but we're
Mine
on.
says 7B. Okay, so
Well, if you want to record our 7As, there was 5 ayes for 7A. Going to 7B.
okay, well, I'm selecting 7B on my iPad, and I'm coming up with
7A's up. She already did.
She canceled it.
All right. 7B, I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the guaranteed maximum price, GMP, in the amount of $5,575,067. I hope I got the number right. For the Bel Air Elementary School Modernization Project to Skyline Builders and Restoration, Inc., using construction manager at-risk methodology.
A second.
Mr. Miglarino, would you like to enlighten us?
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, wanted to just update the board on what we're planning to do. This will be the final modernization project as scheduled in the 2013 bond initiative. So we are getting to the end of that initiative. I think it is important to note that we did reserve a little more than $5 million for this particular project. When we consider all of the expenses, we will be closer to $7 million for this project. Part of that has to do with the escalation cost of construction over the time of when this was originally proposed and the current date. But it also includes that in the 2019 bond, we plan to replace the air conditioning at this school. Since we will be doing a major modernization project, we are going to accelerate the air conditioning project at this particular school, which is almost $1 million of the $7 million that we'll be spending on this particular campus. So it just makes sense for us to be able to do the air conditioning replacement schedule as part of the modernization. Pending the board's decision tonight, this project is geared to start over spring break, so the Friday before spring break, which is March 13th. We're scheduled to move out of the administration building, and we're going to start early to try and get a jump start on the amount of work that's involved in this particular modernization project, especially knowing that the school is transitioning to the traditional school at Bel Air for next year. I did want to recognize Mr. Tony Cohill from Skyline Builders is here in the audience. If he made it this long, there he is. Yep, he's still here, sitting in the back trying to hide. And
You could stand up. Just kidding.
and we're excited with about partnering.
He's so choked up. He's so excited.
That's all I have.
Okay, I think we have one question, so drink while you can. The water.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. We are starting this project on Friday the 13th.
Oh my gosh, that's my lucky day. That's why he's all choked up.
That is correct.
Well, I think only good things can go from there.
Well, I once had a job interview on Friday the 13th at Air Quality. Spoiler alert, I got the job.
All right, anybody have any questions, further discussion? If not, hello, we could take a vote. Do we want to vote? Yes? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All righty then. Moving along to...
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, we are pleased
Can
to
you
be
wait
here.
a second? My goodness. We are just like rushing.
You think people want to go home? I move that the governing
I know.
board
I mean, yes.
approve recommendation for elementary number 31 school name, mascot, and colors.
I second.
Yes, Dr. Z.
There
Hurry
you
up.
go. We're pleased to be here with you tonight to give you an overview of the process that was used to select the recommendation for you tonight for the school name, the colors, and the mascot. Principal Graham of Elementary 31 is here to go over this process with you. Principal Graham.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, thank you. I will go over the presentation.
Will
There we
you?
go. Oh, I have it. It's been a
You must be
very,
tired.
very long day.
Yes.
So I apologize. We use the AMGs, or Administrative Management Guidelines, to name our school. An informational website was started and has been updated consistently with more information as we get it. Our hiring process began for certified staff on February 7th, although the staffing meeting on the next slide was at the end of January. And then our first parent meeting was held at the Post at the Union Park Recreation Center on February 5th. We weren't sure how many people to expect. I was thinking maybe 20, 50. We had standing and sitting room only with over 120 people who showed up from our community. The staffing numbers, again, were provided in January. We've hired our secretary and our plant foreman, as well as our registrar, to help with the planning and staffing. The staffing includes currently 42 certified staff members. We began our staffing 2 weeks before the other schools to provide efficiency. And then our first round of staffing, I did my final interview just after 5 today for that first round. And there are now 10 certified positions out of 42 remaining.
Woohoo.
It's not just been a long day. The district AMG provides our guidelines when selecting a school name and our mascot and colors. We gathered as much input as we could from our stakeholders digitally. The selection panel was then created by a group of parents and students. And originally I asked for the first 3 parents. Okay. The first 3 parents to email with interest in joining the panel, but I received many more than that, and I didn't have the heart to say no. So I invited every single parent and student who were interested to the panel, and that's the picture you see there. We lost count. We had 12 people sign in. but then fresh, warm cookies showed up, and we forgot to get everybody else to sign in. And they were really good.
Oh, there were hot cookies? Wow.
So I pulled the picture out and counted and got approximately 16 parents and about 8 or 9 students. And then my secretary, Jolie, and me. And then Monica was there as well. And we discussed the large amount of suggestions that we received online, narrowed it down, talked about some guidelines and some ideas, and narrowed it down to 3. We had to discuss the naming based on neighborhood reference, and it was really hard looking at the geographic features of the area. It's surrounded by Skunk Creek. Not really a name.
Is
we
that
wanted.
a spoiler alert for the mascot?
Be a lot of forfeits.
We'll
People won't show up.
And
Sorry.
it was tough.
Go ahead.
We had a really tough time because we're an established district with many names, with desert and vista and
Springs.
canyon and mountain, so it was, and creek. It was really hard to come up with a name that wasn't too similar to a name we already had, or even a name we already had in our district or down the road. Happy Valley was a popular one, but there's a Happy Valley charter school, and I didn't want to get confused with a charter school down the road.
That was a wise decision.
So we talked about different options, pulling different names together. And in the end, the top 3 were Dixie Mountain, Prado Valley, and Prado is Meadow, and
Valley too. We'll miss it. Go
and
ahead.
Union Park. So those 3 names went out as well, and we decided that in order to have a mascot idea, we should pair the mascot and the color, because that could go really wrong if we had a separate mascot and a separate color combination. So we agreed that the top 3 mascots would be the toros, which are bull, the zorros, which is a fox, which we thought would be really clever if the
TV.
fox had a mask, black mask on his eyes.
Yeah.
Or the ravens. And the ravens would be paired with black and green. The toros would be a gold and black. And the zorros would be a burnt orange and black. And we had to be careful with the colors as well, because the surrounding schools, when we're looking at uniforms, when we're competing against each other, we don't want to get each other confused.
There's so much involved in that color.
So much. And then I also asked the committee to think about how a cheer would happen with our mascot. And then if we could have an actual mascot out there running around. So I do apologize that we do not have a lizard mascot called the Chuckwalla.
or the Thundercats.
So sorry,
but go on.
HR. So we put out our final 3 for the naming and the mascot and the colors, and that was live for a week, and we received, oh my gosh, over 870 votes. And the final voting closed on the 19th, and here it is.
There's a rendering of the ball.
The Union Park Toros, we will be gold and black. Don't mess with the bulls.
Alrighty then. So do we have questions or do we want to vote? Fabulous little trio thing. Ready to vote? Mm-hmm. Okay. All those in favor of the Union Park Toros with the colors of gold and black, not to be confused with black and gold, say aye.
Aye.
Woohoo! So you are no longer the principal of School 31.
No,
You're the principal of UP. So there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on. Moving on to the preview 8A, because we already did 7D. Yeah, why is everyone running? Oh, here she comes. She's running towards, not away from the light.
I think she's still a little sad from the Chuckwalla. Did not make
goodness.
it to the final.
Really,
three,
the Chuckwalla?
Doesn't fit on a uniform. It's too big.
Really hard for
And the cheer would be really weird.
Okay, let's just move on because something just popped in my head. Go.
President Ordway, Governing Board members, Superintendent Finch, you have 3 different contract drafts in front of you. Our legal consultation this year was done by Udall Shumway. I'm going to point you to the certified contract. But first, all 3 contracts, there's no content changed. They also redesigned them to be a little bit more clear, and I'll show you that on the certified contract. You'll see that each number now has a correlating topic that is underlined with the language that follows. Contract. There is one significant addition, though, this year to the certified contract, and that is number 3, the traditional academy. This language will be listed on everyone's contract, every certificated person's contract. However, it will only apply to those that are staffed at Bel Air. And if you recall, when we shifted into staffing, each member that is joining this campus is agreeing to that 9-day training that is in June, and that is what this contract stipulates, is that they complete that 9-day addenda in June, and it is paid at their daily rate during that time, but because it's in a different fiscal year, that is done by addenda and it's referenced in the contract. Outside of that, there are no other changes, just verbiage changes. That's it.
That's just a preview. If you have any questions, you can email me the week.
Go to the next one. That would be forward motion.
President Ordway, members of the governing board, I now bring another preview item. It's a certified for performance pay plan. On the next slide is the committee for the plan. We did have a parent leave at the end of last year, and then we found a new parent. And then right before our meetings began this year, we found out the other parent was moving to California and was not willing to commute to our committee meetings. So we're down a parent committee member again. But we've met just one time. If we can go to the next slide. And that was on February 6th. And we're now bringing it to you for a preview. Basically, the plan is exactly the same as last year, with kind of one caveat. So if we could go to the next slide, you'll see it's split 50% evaluations, 25% hours, and 25% school letter grades. The evaluations has the same cuts as it did last year at 100%, at 280, 260, and 240 to get 100%, 85%, or 60% of the evaluation component. And it's important to remember here that this is the one component that a teacher can become ineligible for, but still eligible for the other component. And they would become ineligible if he or she receives any ineffective rating of the 6 standards or more than 3 developing ratings. For the hour piece on the next slide, I do have some examples here that are the same examples I showed you last year, where if you got all effectives, you would receive 100% of the payout. As a matter of fact, if you got all effectives except for 1 developing, you would still receive 100% of the payout. You have to have 2 developings to go down to 85% of the payout. On the next slide is the PD hours, responsibility or PD hours. Again, it's 25%, 20 total hours that it has been in last year and several years in the past. And those are hours agreed upon between the principal and the employee, the teacher. We do give a list of examples for the hours for both responsibility or professional development in the plan itself, but that principal could agree to add on to those. The only caveat is they have to be outside the normal work day, and they can't be hours that they are getting paid for or reimbursed for to count for these hours. And finally, on the next slide is our school letter grades. This is the same as last year. Just want to emphasize it's not done by school. It's literally the percent of our schools with a B or higher letter grade. So it's kind of like a district team saying we want at least 70% of our schools to be a B or A letter grade. If it drops below that, the payout would drop down to 75%. And then note there, for this to drop to 75%, we'd have to have 12 of our schools would have to be a C or lower. Right now, we have 3 schools that are a C, and I actually expect to see some movement in the up direction from those schools. I figure probably Dr. Finch and I would probably be out of a job if we get down to 12 schools. If I could go to the next slide, please. There is an appeals process for just the evaluation. It's an appeal for a procedural breach of the process. We do have an appeals committee that's made up of 3 certified classroom teacher, certified staff, and 2 principals, and they would meet and review the appeal. And if the appeal is approved, the payout would move up 1 level. There is a form on the portal page for this. No appeals for school letter grades or responsibility hours. Once those are decided, they're a done deal. Finally, on the next slide, you can see ineligibility conditions. There are 4 reasons a teacher would become ineligible for all of performance pay, and they're no longer with the district. They can have 1 formal level of discipline, but everything else is termination or separation, non-renewal for inadequate classroom performance, or they did not complete their contract and chose to leave the district. They would not be eligible for performance pay. Go 1 more slide, please. This pay, again, as in past several plans, is prorated based on how long you worked in the given year and what your FTE was. So, for example, if you were a half-time FTE, you would be eligible for 50% of the performance pay. You would also only have to do 50% of the hours in that hours component. Finally, just a little comment on leave of absence. We do not penalize an employee that goes out on FMLA for the first 12 weeks. If they just went out for 12 weeks or less, this employee would still be eligible for 100% when they return. And I think there's one more. Yeah, perfect. So the caveat with this plan, the employee met only 1 time and decided to bring this plan back. With kind of a caveat that there's still legislation being discussed about certified performance pay and what type can be in the plan. And we're still have an evaluation committee meeting to discuss how we're going to execute evaluations in the future. If we were to do something, this is a plan for next year. If we were to do something different with the evaluations and it impacted this plan, we'd probably have to bring it back and meet again as a committee, say what do we want to do and bring it back to you.
Awesome. Any questions? All right. Let's go to C. Oh, it keeps going down. Oh, it stopped at Jim. Heather, you don't get it.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, I'm going to give this another try here. See how long I can hold out. We bring for you tonight a preview item of what we refer to as our district performance pay plan. So this is for all non-classroom site fund or non-Proposition 301 employees. We've had this plan in place since 2005, 2006. We've previously provided the minutes from the board approving that plan. But due to a recent legal interpretation, our attorneys are advising us that the board needs to actually have some sort of action on the percentage that actually is part of that plan. The percentage hasn't changed over these last, more than a decade. It's been at 2% after the first year it was implemented. But we want the board to actually ratify those percentages. The process has not changed as well in terms of it's very goal oriented, that the individuals, the employees actually have to meet with the supervisor and establish a goal for the year. They have to achieve that goal. There are some excluding factors that could make somebody ineligible for performance pay as well. But I will attest that that is a very small percentage on an annual basis that get disqualified from the plan. And for the most part, we have used our indirect cost fund to be able to fund this, and our Medicaid and public schools new funding sources, so non-M&O sources of revenue to pay this performance pay. Back when this was implemented in the 2005-2006 year, the conversation and discussion, the rationale for this was to make sure that all of our employees have the opportunity to benefit from some type of performance pay system. What is established with the Classroom Site Fund or Prop 301 that you heard Dr. Smith just reference. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, I should mention we are asking for this percentage to be 2%, and I should have indicated a couple years ago, and I'll follow up on this to make sure I get the exact year. We did increase the what we call the other professional staff. We did, as part of the salary recommendation that the board did approve, it's 2% is their eligibility, or, and gosh, I want to say it's $2,000, whichever is greater. But I'll get you that information so that you have that. So for other professional staff that are more akin to the Classroom Site Fund, it was in an effort to try and make sure that they had a salary amount that was more commensurate with what the Classroom Site Fund amount was.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. So we can move to our 9A discussion item, which is board goals update. We have established that we have board goals that we need to reach and accomplish. We wanted to make sure, Mrs. O'Brien brought that up, I think, to make sure we knew where we were on our journey. Correct, Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes, and Mrs. Taylor, if you could email them back out to everybody, so that we all have a copy. And I know they're also in Vibe too. But we did agree as board members to develop these goals together, and I was just reviewing them again last week, and we hadn't touched base. We do it on a quarterly basis, or almost quarterly, with Dr. Finch, and we haven't talked about these since we approved them. So just want to kind of remind everybody to take a look at them. And the year end is rapidly approaching.
Yeah, and it's just just look where and see where you are on it. As soon as we, Miss Taylor, you have the preliminary notes from the board book that Mrs. O'Brien and I were working on. So I don't know if you want to go another round on that before we distribute it for some more input.
Yeah, she doesn't have the notes. I have them from our meeting.
Right.
We have copy.
So we'll meet again. We worked on it, but we'll meet again, and we've got a lot of stuff. Like I said, I'm very excited to have someone to work on it with. It's only been 12 years, but other than that, it was just to give everybody a gauge on where they are and just look
and
at
support
what she's...
the strategic plan and stuff too. So, Yep.
So, does anyone have anything on that? Oh, mercy. So I think maybe we'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at, listen to it, 8:40.
I move that we adjourn the meeting at 8:40.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Do we have a winner?